The station's fluorescent lights flickered, casting jagged shadows on the cracked linoleum floor. Officer Daniel Hargrove's laughter sliced through the stale air, sharp and cruel, as he held the buzzing clippers over Aisha Coleman's head. She sat, wrists cuffed, her heart pounding so loud it drowned out the jeers from the other cops. This wasn't just a haircut. It was a public execution of her dignity, orchestrated by Hargrove, a man whose badge gleamed brighter than his conscience. Aisha, a 32-year-old community organizer, had been arrested on a flimsy loitering charge pretext, she knew, for the real crime, being black in a town that wore its prejudice like a uniform. The clippers bit into her scalp, and chunks of her thick, coiled hair fell like ash to the floor. Each pass was a message: you don't belong here. Don't squirm, sweetheart, Hargrove sneered, his voice dripping with venom. Just making you presentable for the judge. His buddies chuckled, their eyes glinting with the kind of glee that thrives on someone else's pain. Aisha's jaw clenched, her tears burning hot but refusing to fall. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction. Instead, she fixed her gaze on the wall, where a faded poster about community policing mocked her reality. Aisha had grown up in Elmwood, a small town where the lines between right and wrong blurred depending on your skin color. She'd seen it all: profiling, harassment, the way black kids were tailed in stores while white kids roamed free. But this? This was personal. Hargrove had targeted her for months, ever since she'd organized a protest against police brutality after a local teen, Jamal, was beaten during a traffic stop. Her activism had made her a threat, and Hargrove wasn't one to let threats stand. The clippers stopped. Hargrove stepped back, admiring his work like an artist appraising a canvas. Aisha's scalp stung, exposed and raw, but her spirit burned hotter. "You're done," she whispered, her voice low but steady. Hargrove laughed, mistaking her words for surrender. He didn't know Aisha Coleman. He didn't know the fire she carried, forged in years of fighting for a community that deserved better. The other officers shuffled, some uneasy, others emboldened by Hargrove's bravado. One, a rookie named Officer Patel, averted his eyes, his fingers twitching nervously. Aisha caught his glance and held it, her stare a silent plea: "See me. See this." Patel looked away, guilt flickering across his face before he buried it behind a blank expression. "Take her to holding," Hargrove barked, tossing the clippers onto a desk. The wooden surface was scratched, littered with coffee stains and a handwritten note that read, "Justice will rise." Aisha's eyes lingered on it as two officers yanked her to her feet. The words felt like a lifeline, a promise she'd cling to. In the holding cell, Aisha sat on the cold bench, her fingers tracing her bare scalp. The humiliation was a weight, but it didn't break her. She thought of her grandmother, who'd marched in Selma, who told her, "They can take your hair, your freedom, even your life, but they can't take your soul unless you let them." Aisha's soul was intact, and it was plotting. She'd been studying law at night, juggling her activism with a dream of becoming a judge. Elmwood's courts were a revolving door of bias, where black defendants faced harsher sentences and white cops walked free. Aisha wanted to change that. She'd aced her exams, earned her degree, and was on the cusp of something bigger: a judgeship. But Hargrove didn't know that. To him, she was just another target. Days bled into weeks. Aisha was released on bail, her case pending. The town buzzed with outrage over her arrest, but Hargrove's stunt had split Elmwood in two. Some called it justice, claiming Aisha was a troublemaker who'd gotten what she deserved. Others rallied behind her, their protests swelling outside the station. Aisha didn't join them. She was preparing for something else. The courtroom was packed on the day of Hargrove's disciplinary hearing. He'd been called in after a viral video of Aisha's humiliation sparked national outcry. Hargrove strutted in, his uniform crisp, his smirk unshaken. He'd been here before accusations of misconduct, excessive force, racial bias. Each time, he'd walked away unscathed, protected by a system that valued his badge over his victim's humanity. Aisha wasn't in the room. Not yet. Hargrove leaned back in his chair, cracking a joke to the officer beside him. The crowd murmured, a mix of supporters and detractors. The air was thick with anticipation, like the moment before a storm breaks. Then the door swung open. Aisha stepped in, her presence commanding silence. She wore a black robe, her bald head held high, her eyes sharp as steel. The bailiff's voice rang out, "All rise for the Honorable Aisha Coleman, presiding judge." Gasps rippled through the room. Hargrove froze, his smirk vanishing as if slapped off his face. His eyes darted, searching for an escape, but there was none. Aisha was the storm, and she'd just arrived. She took her seat at the bench, her gaze sweeping the room before landing on Hargrove. He squirmed, his confidence unraveling. This wasn't just a hearing anymore. It was a reckoning. "Your Honor," the prosecutor began, "Officer Hargrove's actions on June 1, 2025, constitute a gross abuse of power. The complainant, now before us, was subjected to dehumanizing treatment, motivated by racial animus." He gestured to Aisha, whose expression remained unreadable. Hargrove's lawyer, a slick man named Carter, jumped up. "Objection. My client's actions were within protocol. The complainant resisted arrest, and the haircut was a standard procedure for hygiene in holding." Aisha's gavel cracked like thunder. "Overruled," she said, her voice calm but laced with iron. "We'll hear the evidence, Mr. Carter. And I'll remind you that this court values truth over excuses." The room buzzed. Hargrove's jaw tightened, his hands balling into fists. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by someone he'd tried to break. Aisha leaned forward, her eyes locking onto his. "Officer Hargrove, you'll have your chance to speak. But know this, I see you. This court sees you." The hearing unfolded over hours, each testimony peeling back layers of Hargrove's career, complaints buried, witnesses intimidated, patterns of targeting black residents. Officer Patel, the rookie, took the stand, his voice shaky. "I saw what happened to Ms. Coleman," he said. "It wasn't right. I should have said something then." His admission hung heavy, a crack in the blue wall of silence. Aisha listened, her face a mask of impartiality, but her heart raced. This wasn't just about her. It was about Jamal, about every black person in Elmwood who'd been profiled, harassed, or worse. It was about a system that let men like Hargrove thrive. When Hargrove took the stand, he leaned into his usual charm. "Your Honor, I was doing my job. Ms. Coleman was disruptive, a threat to order. I followed protocol." Aisha's eyes narrowed. "Protocol doesn't include humiliation, officer. Nor does it include targeting someone for their race or their voice." Her words cut through his bravado, and for the first time, Hargrove looked small. The hearing stretched into the evening, the courtroom growing hotter, the tension thicker. Witnesses recounted similar stories: Hargrove's taunts, his selective enforcement, his glee in wielding power. Aisha's ruling loomed, and with it, the weight of her new role. She wasn't just a judge, she was a symbol of what Elmwood could be if justice prevailed. As the final arguments wrapped, Aisha called for a recess. She stepped into her chambers, closing the door. Alone, she touched her scalp, the skin still sensitive. She thought of her grandmother's words, of the note on that desk, "Justice will rise." She'd risen, but the fight wasn't over. Back in the courtroom, she delivered her ruling. "Officer Hargrove, this court finds you guilty of misconduct and abuse of power. Your actions were not only unprofessional but rooted in prejudice. You're suspended without pay, pending further investigation, and I'm recommending your termination." The room erupted, cheers from some, curses from others. Hargrove's face was a mask of shock, then rage. He stood, pointing at Aisha. "You think you've won? This town won't change." Aisha didn't flinch. "This town is changing, officer. And it starts here. As Hargrove was led out, the crowd's noise faded into a hum. Aisha looked out at the faces, black, white, young, old. Some glared, others nodded. She knew this wasn't the end. Elmwood's wounds ran deep, and her robe was no magic fix. But it was a start. She adjourned the court, her gavel's echo a promise. Aisha Coleman had walked through fire and emerged not just whole, but powerful. And she wasn't done. The gavel's echo lingered in the courtroom, a sound that seemed to ripple beyond the walls of Elmwood's aging municipal building. Aisha Coleman stepped down from the bench, her black robe flowing like a quiet declaration of authority. The crowd dispersed, some whispering in awe, others muttering in dissent. Hargrove's suspension was a spark, and Aisha knew it could ignite either progress or chaos. She felt the weight of every eye on her, some filled with hope, others with resentment. This wasn't just a ruling, it was a line drawn in the sand of a town fractured by history. Outside, the evening air was thick with the scent of rain. Protesters gathered, their signs bobbing in the fading light. Justice for Aisha, clashed with Back the Blue. Aisha's shaved head, still a raw reminder of her ordeal, drew stares as she walked to her car. She didn't flinch. She'd learned long ago that vulnerability was a luxury she couldn't afford. Not here. Not now. Back at home, Aisha sat at her kitchen table, a single lamp casting soft light on the law books stacked beside her. Her phone buzzed with messages, support from her community organizers, threats from anonymous numbers. One text stood out, from her best friend, Lena, "You did it, girl. But watch your back." Aisha sighed, her fingers tracing the edge of her scalp. The humiliation Hargrove inflicted wasn't just personal, it was a calculated act to silence her. But silence wasn't in her blood. The next morning, Elmwood buzzed with the fallout. Local news ran loops of the courtroom scene, Aisha's steely gaze juxtaposed with Hargrove's stunned expression. Social media erupted, hashtags like Justice for Aisha and Elmwood Reckoning trending. Some praised her courage, others called her a biased activist judge. Aisha scrolled through the posts, her heart heavy but resolute. She'd known her appointment as Elmwood's first black female judge would stir the pot. She hadn't expected it to boil over so fast. At the police station, Hargrove's suspension had cracked the thin veneer of unity among the officers. Some, like Patel, quietly supported Aisha's ruling, their consciences pricked by years of looking the other way. Others rallied around Hargrove, painting him as a victim of woke justice. The station's break room became a battleground of whispers and glares. Patel, still shaken from his testimony, overheard a veteran cop mutter, "She's just playing the race card. This'll blow over." Patel said nothing, but his silence felt heavier than ever. Aisha, meanwhile, prepared for her next court session. Her chambers were sparse, save for a photo of her grandmother and a small wooden plaque engraved with "Justice will rise." The words, echoing that note from the station, grounded her. She'd taken Hargrove's case personally, not out of revenge, but because it was a chance to show Elmwood what justice could look like. Her next case was a minor drug charge, a black teenager named Malik caught with marijuana. The police reports screamed overreach, and Aisha suspected Hargrove's influence. She'd dig deeper. In court, Malik stood, his eyes darting nervously. His public defender, a young woman named Sarah, argued for leniency, citing Malik's clean record and the racial profiling that led to his arrest. The prosecutor, a holdover from Elmwood's old guard, pushed for jail time, calling Malik a repeat offender in the making. Aisha listened, her pen tapping lightly. She saw herself in Malik, young, black, caught in a system designed to trip him up. "Mr. Thompson," she addressed Malik, her voice firm but kind. "This court sees you. Not just the charge, but you. I'm dismissing this case due to insufficient evidence and questionable arrest circumstances. But I want you to stay out of trouble. You've got potential, don't let this town steal it." Malik nodded, tears brimming. The courtroom murmured, some approving, others skeptical. Aisha knew every ruling would be scrutinized, her race and history weaponized against her. But she also knew Malik deserved a chance, just as she'd fought for hers. Word of her ruling spread, and Elmwood's divide deepened. At a town hall meeting, residents packed the community center, their voices a cacophony of anger and hope. Aisha attended, not as a judge but as a citizen, listening as people aired their grievances. A white shop owner claimed, "Hargrove kept us safe. This new judge is just stirring trouble." A black mother countered, "Safe for who? My son can't walk home without being stopped." The room crackled with tension, and Aisha felt the weight of her role. She wasn't just judging cases, she was judging a town's soul. Hargrove, meanwhile, wasn't idle. Suspended but not silenced, he rallied his supporters at a local bar, his voice slurred with whiskey and defiance. "She thinks she's untouchable," he spat. "But I know this town. They'll turn on her." His buddies nodded, their loyalty fueled by shared resentment. But not everyone was on board. Patel, nursing a soda at the bar's edge, slipped out early. He'd seen enough to know Hargrove's days were numbered. Aisha's next challenge came sooner than expected. A class action lawsuit was filed against the Elmwood Police Department, alleging systemic racism. Aisha wasn't assigned the case conflict of interest, given her history, but her name was everywhere, her story the spark that lit the fuse. The lawsuit named Hargrove and several colleagues, citing years of discriminatory practices. Evidence poured in, body cam footage, arrest records, witness accounts. Elmwood was on trial, and Aisha was its unwilling centerpiece. She met with Lena at a diner, seeking a moment of peace. "They're coming for you," Lena warned, stirring her coffee. "The lawsuits got people scared. Some want you gone." Aisha nodded, her eyes on the wooden table, its surface etched with decades of scratches. "Let them try," she said. "I didn't come this far to back down." The lawsuit's first hearing was a circus. Protesters clashed outside, police in riot gear forming a line. Inside, Aisha watched from the gallery, her presence a quiet statement. The plaintiff's lawyer presented damning evidence. Hargrove's arrest logs showed black residents were 5 times more likely to be stopped than white ones. Aisha's own case was cited, her shaved head a symbol of the department's cruelty. The defense, led by Carter, argued isolated incidents and officer discretion. The judge, an older white man, listened impassively, but Aisha caught his glance. He knew who she was. Back at the station, Patel made a decision. He contacted the plaintiff's lawyer, offering to testify about the department's culture. It was a risk, his career, his safety, but Aisha's courage had stirred something in him. "I can't keep quiet anymore," he told the lawyer. "It's not just her. It's everyone they've hurt." The lawsuit gained traction, and Elmwood streets grew restless. Aisha received death threats, her car vandalized with slurs. But she also got letters handwritten, heartfelt, from people who saw her as hope. One, from a black teenager, read, "You make me believe I can be somebody." Aisha kept it on her desk, next to her grandmother's photo. Hargrove's termination hearing arrived, Aisha presiding. The room was electric, every seat filled. Hargrove, stripped of his uniform, looked diminished but defiant. "I served this town," he said, his voice rising. "You're punishing me for doing my job." Aisha leaned forward. "Your job wasn't to degrade, officer. It was to protect. You failed." Her ruling was swift, termination, with a recommendation for criminal charges. The room exploded, cheers and shouts colliding. Hargrove stormed out, his face a mask of fury. That night, Aisha stood on her porch, the stars sharp against the sky. She thought of her grandmother, of Jamal, of Malik, of every soul Elmwood had tried to crush. She'd won a battle, but the war for justice was long. The town was changing, slowly, painfully, but it was changing. As she turned to go inside, her phone buzzed with a news alert: Hargrove had been arrested for witness intimidation. Aisha smiled faintly. The system wasn't perfect, but it was bending. Elmwood's story wasn't over. Aisha knew she'd face more fights, more hate. But she also knew she wasn't alone. Patel's testimony, the lawsuit's momentum, the voices rising, they were proof that justice could rise, even in a place as broken as this. What do you think? Is justice a destination or a journey? Share your thoughts on where Elmwood goes from here.